What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSided. It's college football betting show. I'm your host, Reed Wallach. Follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach. Loaded show for you today. Some are calling this the slate of the year, slate of the decade. There's so much going on this week. Second time since 1993. There are 3 5-0 teams or better going at it this week. And that doesn't even count our marquee matchup, one I've had circled since the summer. USC traveling to Utah in a Pac-12 showdown. And I thought we got to pull out all the big guns for this one. So I went out and I poached the co-host of the Reign of Troy podcast, Michael Castillo, and Alicia de Artola Castillo, the great host of the Reign of Troy radio show. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this fantastic slate. I'm pumped to talk college football, pumped to talk Utah, USC with you guys. Alicia, I'll start with you. How's it going? Thank you for joining.
It's awesome. Thank you for having us. This is super exciting. And yeah, I'm ready to do some picks.
Yeah, great. Michael, how's it going, man?
It's great. I'm glad to be here. This is a hell of a week, like you said, and plenty to talk about for sure.
Yeah, this is, you're going to start to see the cream rise to the crop now. You got these undefeated matchups, and this week is going to help settle not just conference pictures in the Pac-12, SEC, Big 12 all over, but the college football playoff picture is going to look a little bit cleaner after this week. A few teams going to drop out of the race, in my opinion. So we'll circle back to our Alabama, Tennessee, our TCU, Oklahoma State, all that stuff. And let's start, though, with the Pac-12, Utah and USC going at it. And for those that watch the early read, they know that I don't believe in USC. I do not buy it. I don't buy this. You could import all these talented players and you could build a college football playoff contender in one season. I have been a Utah believer, though, and they didn't look so great against UCLA, kind of their first real road test since the loss to Florida. So kind of all over the place on Utah. USC, meanwhile, just continue to chug it along. Easy covers left and right, looks a little easy in the box score. Guys, I want to ask you, because you guys cover USC, of course, what does the national audience need to know, besides your Caleb Williams is awesome and Lincoln Riley's a great play caller? What's maybe something under the radar that is driving this USC hype train going into Utah?
You got to look at the defense. USC's defense is this weird enigma in that they're 105th in rush defense by yards per carry. That looks terrible, right?
Yeah.
Yet you look at the splits and they are allowing half the rushing yards in the second half versus the first half. They're a team that makes a ton of second half adjustments. They haven't allowed a passing touchdown in the second half. They are holding teams to 6 points in the second half, lead the country in turnovers, in sacks. Incredibly opportunistic. They're led by Tuli Tuipulotu on the defensive line, who leads the nation in sacks. And so they're a little bit unorthodox in that they're going to bend and don't break. They're going to give you a whole bunch of opportunities to gain yards between the 20s. But when you have a top 5 red zone defense on top of a defense that makes havoc plays, you can afford to win a bunch of games, and ultimately you see that with a bunch of covers.
That's been the story of the season is I think a lot of people thought that this team, we have a joke about how we would just be fine if USC had been Big 12 bad for a little while. And we were always very frustrated because the offense was never explosive enough in the past when it felt like the offense should carry the team. And that if the defense was going to suck, the defense was going to suck. And it felt in the first 2 weeks of this season that we might truly get a Big 12 bad USC team. And then the defense just decided to turn the turnover luck is gonna slow down narrative on its head, because the last 2 weeks that they haven't gotten turnovers. They've done it by really tightening things up in the second half and proving that it wasn't necessarily a fluke that we saw from them preventing teams from scoring more than 20 points more often than not. It really is what this defense might be. And now the flip side, the surprise of the season, is that if there's a concern around USC, it's back on offense, because the offense, as scary as it is at times, as immensely talented as the players that transferred in are, there's big questions about the offensive line. Injuries have hit in the worst possible spots. And now it does feel like USC is relying on Caleb Williams to be Superman when that's not the position you necessarily want to be in if you want to be a true contender. You're going to win a lot of games with Caleb Williams being Superman, but you're not going to win the big games if he's having to scramble for his life. So it's this weird flip that's happened for USC going into this Utah game.
Two excellent points. I was going to point to the defense has been better, I think, than expected. Still best turnover margin in the country by a wide margin, 14 in terms of turnover. So USC, listen, they're opportunistic. Sometimes it's a skill, sometimes it's luck. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. And the offensive line has some issues that is going to be tested against a Utah defense that is young, maybe not as good as your typical Utah defense under Kyle Whittingham, but there's still talent on that roster. They're going to be home. And, we saw it last year too. Utah kind of stumbled out of the gates and then they picked it up as the season went along. Maybe it's not the same script, but this is a Utah team that typically gets better as the season goes on. One question before we get into breaking down the Utah USC game. Maybe this is more eye test for me, but it feels like USC, this is not what we expected from this offense. Yes, is explosive, but they play very methodically. They are not trying to run up and down the field and get into a track meet. They're trying to basically march down the field slowly, but it feels like they're putting themselves in a lot of third and long situations. And Alicia, you pointed to it. It's kind of Caleb Williams sometimes having to be Superman. Do you think that is a sign of concern to come, or you think that's just a product of the offense right now? And they're playing 4 downs. This is an aggressive 4th down team. They're playing 4 down territory, so they're okay being behind the sticks on 3rd down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what worries me is that the offensive line is forcing Caleb Williams to scramble, not having a ton of success on 1st and 2nd down necessarily, and then it's a Superman play on 3rd down. It does feel like defenses have figured out that they just need to keep things in front of them because you'd rather force USC into being a methodical offense than getting burned over the top, which we saw in the first couple of weeks USC was capable of doing. They haven't been as explosive in recent weeks. In fact, there were a couple weeks in there where they weren't getting any explosive plays in the passing game, and it was a concern. The saving grace there, though, is that USC's offensive line might be questionable in pass protection at times, but Travis Dye and the running game has been excellent when USC has been willing to lean on them. And I guess that's the big question that I have for this team going forward, because in the second half against Washington State, it felt like there was a directive, we're just going to lean on Travis Dye, and that's going to be the way that we go. And then things settle down for USC's offense. Will USC be willing to lean on their run game more often to open up things in the passing game, which is, I think, a script that you wouldn't have expected. Lincoln Riley's offense does rely on the run game, but I almost expected the pass game to open things up for the run game. It's got to be the reverse, and Riley and the team has to be willing to put the game on Travis Dye's shoulders instead of Caleb Williams' shoulders more often for things to be, I think, more steady and less the up and down roller coaster of will Caleb make a play on this play. And I'm not sure that they're willing to do that yet. So it's a mystery.
Yeah, let's see. Michael, any other thoughts before we talk specifically Utah USC on kind of the Trojan, how this season's gone? Anything bettors need to know about this team heading into the big matchup?
No, I think if anything, just to go off those points, SC has been more methodical. We thought they'd be more explosive. If anything, to me, I think that kind of bodes well down the line. We know that this team is battle tested. They had to pull one out against Oregon State, but they did. They had to make adjustments against Arizona State, and they did. They had to make adjustments against Washington State, and they did. When teams have played too high safety to take away the big play, they've still gone methodically, and they've always had an answer for everything. Obviously you want to see the big 60-point offense like we saw in week 1 against Rice. We haven't seen that again, and at some point you're going to want to see that more consistently. But I think the diversity in the offensive style, I think, could pay dividends long term. What that means in the betting game, I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. We got USC going to Rice-Eccles Stadium to take on Utah. Market currently around like Utah juiced -3, small -3.5 favorite. Total pushing 64.5 currently. So high total. Utah's favored. And I mean, I've been saying that I'm backing Utah in this spot. This is where I thought USC gets, tripped up or something, even though I thought it could happen earlier in the season. The market also agrees, though. They are not giving USC a top 10 team. They're not giving them any credit really here. They're saying Utah is probably the better team on a neutral despite 2 losses already this season. I'd say Utah has had the tougher schedule to date. I think we could all agree on that, whether they won or lost, tougher schedule. So Alicia, I'll start with you because you're looking at the side here. Do you think USC is capable of going on the road? Because we saw their first real road test. I don't really count Stanford as a competitive team. Oregon State, I think, is closer to the middle of the pack. They struggled in Corvallis. They were lucky to pull that game out. I think Caleb Williams had a few incredible plays down the stretch. Going to Utah, though, is not any easier. This is only going to get harder for them. And this is a Utah team off a loss, very well disciplined. We see the comments coming in with Utah love. Alicia, are you going to go against the Trojans or are you going to ride with your team?
I really would love to pick USC. I'm actually closer to picking USC than I have been at any point this entire year.
Okay.
This has always been circled for me as a loss because going to Rice-Eccles has been the doom of many a USC team. Utah, even after watching them get really exposed by UCLA in a way that I was not expecting, they're a different team at home. I think that it's no surprise to me that Utah's 2 losses are both on the road. And that is the thing that's causing me to not go forward with USC, because if this was at the Coliseum, I would be talking about how Utah's run defense is suspect at this point. And what I just talked about earlier, USC could go in here and lean on Travis Dye in a way that I wouldn't have predicted a few months ago. And that USC's defense looks like they are opportunistic and do create havoc. And Utah's offense doesn't always have it. Utah's offense is suspect when it comes to being sort of tripped up. And that would have tempted me to pick USC in this game. But Rice-Eccles is a different story. Utah is a different team there. And USC so far has not been strong on the road. You mentioned that Stanford's not a road test. I would agree, but that's one of the worst games USC's played this year.
Oh, yeah.
The worst games that USC has played this year were the 2 games on the road, Oregon State and Stanford. And that was the worst that the defense looked. That was a second half where the offense looked like they just completely forgot how to play football. And that was at Stanford, and Oregon State was a step up in terms of atmosphere, but that was also an Oregon State crowd that was limited because of construction at Reser Stadium. That was what was it, like 20,000 capacity in there, and USC was surprised by the atmosphere. Well, Rice-Eccles is not under construction and will not have just 20,000 raucous fans there, and it'll be a whole other environment. And I really want to believe in USC, but I also fear that atmosphere more than I trust that this USC team will have an offensive line that isn't causing them problems, or a defense that could fall behind in the first half because things just catch up to them. So yeah, I'm taking Utah in this game.
Okay. So going against your side here, Michael, where are you leaning in this game? Like I said, Utah around -3, -3.5 favorite, depending where you look. Total 64 range, 64, 65.
Yeah, I think that there's a million reasons to be skeptical of USC, absolutely. And Utah, the same thing. I mean, Cam Rising hasn't looked like the same Cam Rising we saw down the stretch last year. Utah definitely struggled against UCLA last week at the Rose Bowl. But to me, this is going to be a low-scoring affair. We've seen it. You mentioned how SC wants to be methodical. And when pushes come to shove, and so far this year, Lincoln Riley's been totally fine with doing that. So if anything, I'm sort of big on the under here. Like these are the top 2 scoring defenses in the Pac-12. SC first at 18.7 points per game. Utah's only allowing 19. Like I mentioned earlier, SC allowing 6 points in the second half. I think you kind of put this all together, and this ends up being that tight struggle fest. And it comes down to who wants to run the ball more. SC has been reluctant to do that. So until that happens, I'm sort of leaning Utah in that sense.
Yeah, we're looking similar fashion here. I'm going to be on the first half under in this one. A few things brought me to this. Like we said, neither team is running that fast. USC's in the 80s in terms of seconds per play. Utah's outside the top 100. So both teams are going to play slow. I do think both teams are going to lean on the run, and neither team has been explosive. We look at these scoring offenses, but it's more efficiency than explosiveness. No team is above the national average in terms of explosive pass or run rate. So I think this is going to be conservative. I think it's going to be buttoned up early. Also, something to keep in mind, USC special teams has been a problem. SP plus outside the top 100 in terms of special teams. I was mentioning that. It feels like this could be a perfect spot for something like turnover regression to hit or bad kicking game where like that's what gets USC. That kind of all comes to a head really quickly. So I think early in this game, one or two stops, this game is off the track. I mean, first half total of like 32, 33. I like that first half under. I was able to bet Utah very early. That number's long gone. If it got back under 3, I like Utah. My number's like right around 3. I don't like Utah as much as I wish I did going into this game. I think that there are concerns on the Utah defense, but Alicia really hit the nail on the head. Rice-Eccles Stadium is a different monster for this Utah team. They're going to be fired up. Off a loss also, you're probably getting even more focused. Maybe they're looking ahead to this matchup. I lean the Utah side. I like the under a lot. I think first half under is the way I'm going to play it, though. I think we see a super, super conservative first half. One stop, someone goes for it in the 30s in the green zone. All of a sudden, this total's way off whack. So I like the under with 2, not as explosive offenses that you think, but awesome breakdown on USC Utah there. That was awesome. Like, just to recap real quick, Alicia's taking Utah -3. Michael's on the under 64.5. And then I am taking the first half under 33. Make sure you're shopping around, though, because those numbers are going to be on the move all week long. So we're sticking in the Pac-12, though, because you guys are Rain of Troy Radio. Make sure you like and subscribe to them on YouTube. But you guys are Pac-12 first. We got to make sure we get your Pac-12 fix in. So I want to start with Alicia here. Looking at the Colorado-Cal game, maybe not the most appetizing game on the board with a low total, but Alicia's got a best bet there, so let's hear about it.
Colorado is extremely bad. They are horrendously bad, historically bad. And Cal is the definition of a meh team. Like, there's just not much nice to say about Cal, but at least they're not Colorado, who is very, and I cannot stress this enough, very bad. So yes, I'm taking Cal and Colorado under 48.5 because Cal is not an explosive offense and Colorado is not going to score points against Cal's defense. This is going to be the definition of like a 24-3 game that only the sickos watch. And I might be a sicko, so I might watch it, but 40, I cannot imagine these two teams combining for 40 points, let alone 48 points. That's just like, I take it.
Strong conviction there. Michael, yes. What do you got here? You're looking at another total, maybe the complete opposite, though, as the Colorado Cowboy. What do you see in Arizona, Washington?
Yeah, Arizona's going on the road to Husky Stadium at Washington. It's an afternoon game, but this has all the makings of Pac-12 afternoon, I guess. The over is hit in 5 of 6 Washington games. Sort of look for Michael Penix to bounce back, even though he struggled, or UW struggled last week on the road at ASU in the loss. He's still a lock for 300 yards and a few touchdowns. Washington just gave up 45 points to a team led by a backup quarterback at ASU. Arizona has a bunch of young stud receivers in Cowing, Singer, and McMillan. A lot of points over here with the over at 73.
Yeah, Cowing is an NFL player, in my opinion. Big transfer from UTEP. Delora's been slinging it. I think Washington probably wins 2 touchdown favorite, but like getting Arizona playing from behind probably helps that get over because they're going to get their quota. We saw it against Oregon last week. I think final score was 49-22 or something. Again, over, something in that range. So over again, though. So don't hate either of those plays for 2 separate reasons. I'm looking at another total, though. Oregon State, Washington State, under 53.5. For those that watched the early read last week, we took the Oregon State over because they're playing Stanford. More on that game in a little bit. But, Chance Nolan didn't play with a neck injury. He's still a game-time decision, and the total got all out of whack. I lost my bet early in the week. It dropped all the way down to 53, went over that number. I like Washington State, though. I like their defense a lot. They're also playing without Nakia Watson, their starting running back. He got hurt in the USC game. And Renard Bell has 20 catch on the year. He's going to be out, too. So I think this Washington State offense is going to struggle. Oregon State, rush-heavy approach. I think Washington State is going to benefit after the USC game. That run defense is going to look a little bit better than it did against USC. Oregon State likes to play slow, outside top 100 in plays per minute. I think that, 28-27 last week, whether it's Nolan or it's the backup again, I don't see a big difference. So I like the under 53.5. So 3 totals in the Pac-12. To recap really quick, Alicia has taken the under 48.5 in Colorado. Michael's going the complete opposite way, taking the over 73 in Arizona, Washington. And I'm going back to the under train. I'm going to take Washington State, Oregon State, under 53.5. There's our Pac-12 bets. And now we're going to talk some underdogs. We're going to bring up one of the marquee matchups in this segment. But, I mean, there's, you're starting to see some separation of teams, and a lot of spreads get blown out. And I want to mention also, ton of quarterback uncertainty this week. If you are betting, make sure you keep an eye on some of the quarterback news. I think there's like 10 to 12 starting quarterbacks that are game time decisions heading into this week. So make sure, before you're betting, why is this line where it is? There's a ton of injury concerns there. But Alicia, I want to start with you. Big 12, Iowa State, Texas. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, Iowa State, I got them plus 16.5. That just feels like an absurd line to me. It feels like an overreaction to the offense that we saw from Texas against Oklahoma. And the one thing we know from the trend for Oklahoma is that their defense has absolutely just collapsed. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're going to see the kind of numbers from Texas against Iowa State, a team that has a legitimate defense that's limited Kansas and Kansas State to paltry offensive outputs in losses. So yes, you might be tempted. You see the 3-3 record for Iowa State and go, we don't know about this, but their defense is showing up week to week. And I think that Quinn Ewers is still a freshman quarterback. Texas is still a team that I have questions about, and I'm not ready to jump on that train yet just because they obliterated an Oklahoma team that I think we can all agree looks like the saddest thing that you've ever seen. And we've all watched Nebraska football over the last couple of years. Like, what's happened to Oklahoma feels like just a once in a lifetime event for their collapse. And Texas is gonna, I think, have a little bit of a rude awakening against Iowa State. That doesn't mean they're gonna lose, but 6.5 points, that's giving too many points.
Yeah, this is, I don't know if I'm going to go Iowa State or I'm going to take the under, but I like where your head's at with this bet with Iowa State as an underdog. This is a spot they thrive in. Matt Campbell as a coach, 34-20 against the spread as an underdog. So this guy thrives in this role of dog, plays super slow. It looks like Max Borkow, he's looking to jump on the Texas train, but this is a really fat and happy spot for the Longhorns. They just absolutely boat raced Oklahoma last week. Their biggest rival, I believe I saw, was the biggest margin in the Red River Showdown history, 49-0. So they also play at Oklahoma State next week. You can maybe get Texas looking ahead, maybe a little, looking ahead. Well, it's a sandwich spot. I think that Iowa State, whether it's the under totals around like 49.5 or them staying within this big number of 16.5, Iowa State wants to play slow. 3-3-5 defense is going to keep everything in front of them. I don't hate this play at all. Michael, I'm a Wisconsin grad. I don't know if you could see the helmet behind me, but there I am. You're looking Big Ten, though. Not Wisconsin, but you're looking Illinois, Minnesota. What are you seeing here?
Sort of similar, Brett Bielema, right? Like, it's not too dissimilar.
Yeah. It's all the same Big Ten football.
So I'm taking Illinois at plus 6.5. The line is just continuing to get bigger with the uncertain status of Tommy DeVito at quarterback, and rightfully so. Like, there's a lot of underdogs that, like you mentioned, that have quarterback issues. Kentucky, NC State, the list goes on. Yeah. I kind of like Illinois here because it's a Big Ten game. It's Brett Bielema. The thing's going to get ugly in Champaign. I like Minnesota a lot, especially with Tanner Morgan kind of having a bye week to come off of that Purdue loss. But there's just something about a grudgy Big Ten West game in Champaign that this feels like something that's a little bit closer than 6.5 for me for the Illini.
Oh yeah, I mean total under 40. I mean total's 39 and a half before we got on the show. So there, there's points are going to be at a premium here. We saw last week 9-6 Illinois beat Iowa, but I agree with you. The Tommy DeVito injury is going to be a big one here because Satowski came in for him last week, and it was brutal to watch. I think he averaged like 3.5 yards per pass attempt. So I mean, it's going to be gross, but again, that's where the underdogs become valuable with a low total. So maybe a game with maybe a few more points scored than Iowa, Minnesota, Tennessee, Alabama. I'm going to take the Vols at +7.5. I've not been the biggest Alabama believer in terms of like, are they the best team in the country? I think that's probably either Ohio State or Georgia, but we imagine Bryce Young is going to play, right? I imagine he plays. Is he 100%? Not certain on that. We'll see. Didn't play last week, and we saw him kind of struggle with Texas A&M. If Bryce Young's going to play, though, the weakness of this Tennessee defense is in the secondary. And if Bryce Young's shoulder isn't 100%, he can't get that vertical passing game going. It's not going to look pretty because Tennessee's best part of the defense is on the defensive line. They are top 10 in rush yards allowed. They are 17th in defensive line yards. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Bryce Young to perform with a sprained AC joint. Maybe he looks 100% and Alabama looks great, but this Tennessee offense looks like a wagon. I mean, they went to LSU, we'll call it above average national defense. They hung 40 on them. Hendon Hooker's under control of this offense. I think they're going to get back Cedric Tillman, who had he had the tightrope ankle procedure to make sure he was back from his high ankle sprain. I think he's going to be able to go. We'll see. It's worth monitoring, but over a touchdown with the Alabama questions, I like the Vols. I want to give you each a chance to comment because this is one of the bigger games on the card. 2 top 10 teams. Do you guys think the Vols are live, or is this like classic hyped up program meets Alabama and gets smoked? Alicia, I'll start with you.
That's sort of where I'm leaning.
Okay.
I think that there's the sort of the head and the heart with this pick. I think everything you lay out is the perfect brain argument for why Tennessee has a chance in this. And I agree with every single point. I too am skeptical of Alabama. Bryce Young, even if he's there, he's not going to be at his best. There's no way he's at his best. But my heart says do not go against Nick Saban. Just don't do it. I don't care what they look like against Texas A&M. I don't care what they look like against Texas. This is still Alabama, and this is still Tennessee. So I would lean with my heart here and still just go with Alabama. And if Tennessee pulls this off, then that is the statement of the year for sure.
Yeah. Michael, I appreciate Alicia also saying like my handicap was there, like the brain was in it. I appreciate that. The argument was there. I crafted a sound argument. Whether it comes true or not, I can only do so much. But Michael, do you think Tennessee's live for an upset? Do you think they could keep it close? Where are you seeing here?
I absolutely do. I think that we've seen many a Tennessee team in the past where we wondered much like Texas and Florida State and Miami, the whole are they back thing, right? And Tennessee's had a bunch of opportunities to show that they are a fraud. They beat Florida. They absolutely murdered LSU this past week. If anything, Alabama's struggles with Texas and A&M kind of play too much into it, where I think that Tennessee is a very good pick there.
Yeah. There are underdog best bets. Got one more segment to hit on, but let's quickly recap. Alicia's taking Iowa State +16.5 against Texas. Michael's going with Illinois at home, catching 6.5 against Minnesota. And then I going against Bama. I'm going against Nick Saban. We'll see how that goes. I'm taking Tennessee +7.5 against Alabama. There are underdog bets. Something we like to do on the show. I know you guys are on the West Coast, so this might not apply as well, but some late night action, some, prime time, 7:30, 8 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. But I know there's 2 bets in the same game. So I'll start with Alicia. You're looking at Clemson, Florida State. Really interesting game. One of the more underrated ones with this loaded slate. But what are you seeing Noles Tigers from Tallahassee?
Yeah, the way that you have talked about USC this year and not trusting them and expecting them to stumble at some point, that's me with Clemson. I don't trust this Clemson team, but they force me to start to give them some respect because they did beat Wake Forest. They did beat NC State. They get Florida State, the next contender, to potentially be the one to trip them up, to be the one that exposes them as like frauds, which I've been waiting for this entire time. And I wish I trusted Florida State more enough to be able to take like a spread pick on this. But the one thing I do think is Clemson's defense is going to control this game. I don't like 51.5 points as an over. I feel very comfortable going with the under here. It's going to be a little bit of a dogfight, I think. And as much as I would love to see Florida State pull off this upset here, I think that more likely it's going to be Clemson in a little bit of a low scoring kind of who's going to hand the win to the other team kind of game.
Yeah, Florida State, brutal loss last week to NC State. Jordan Travis, they were in field goal range through an inexplicable interception in the end zone. One of the worst decisions I've ever seen. I was watching it live. I couldn't believe what I was watching. 2 straight losses for the Noles. This line opened over a touchdown. Clemson favored by over a touchdown. Now it's, trending towards a field goal. So a lot of interesting movement there. I don't hate the underplay. Michael, you're looking at maybe not as exciting as you think Stanford Notre Dame is, but Notre Dame's looking a lot better as of late. Now Drew Ply is getting settled into being the quarterback. What are you seeing here between the Irish and the Cardinal?
Yeah, there's no reason to watch this game for true football reasons. Notre Dame and Stanford is a rivalry that I think that we all want more from. And this is a Stanford team that we surely want more from. They're 1-4 against the spread, 1-4 outright. Haven't beaten an FBS team, coming off of a embarrassing final second loss to Oregon State last week, an Oregon State team with a backup quarterback. Yep. Now they're going to play a Notre Dame team who is finding their quarterback in Drew Pine. Stanford has already gotten burned by Caleb Williams and Michael Penix. They've had tough road tests at Washington and at Oregon with double-digit dogs, and they got beat both times and couldn't cover. So this only adds more to it. You go back to South Bend for the Irish after 2 big wins at North Carolina and then the Shamrock Series against BYU. There is no way that the Irish don't have a really coming out party in the rejuvenation of that program this year after the tough September. So I like Notre Dame ginormous in this game against Stanford.
Yeah, lane 17. I am looking same area. I'm going to go over though. This is my Stanford over trend. I watch these games and David Shaw, whether he's ahead or behind, he's trying to go over and, catching 17. We saw this against Oregon, playing through the bitter end. I was up till 3 a.m. watching that, and he kicked a field goal down, I think like 24 points or 21 points for no reason whatsoever. There were 4 minutes left. So David Shaw's pushing the pace at the end of games, especially in blowouts, which is going to be huge for an over this low. 52.5 I think there's 53s. I still like it, up to 55. A few nuggets just to help this out, but Notre Dame probably should have scored more against BYU last week. Michael, you're talking coming out party. It should have been last week. 28-20 final, but they were 92nd percentile over the last 2 seasons in success rate. They got stopped inside the 5 twice. They settled for a field goal 1 time, didn't score another time. So you're now going up against a Stanford defense line that is garbage, one of the worst in the Power 5. I think Notre Dame's going to run all over them. Both teams top 20 in special teams. And also Notre Dame's defense maybe could let Stanford hang around in this game, at least early. Bottom 10 in the country in red zone touchdown percentage. So when teams get in close, they are converting them into 6. So I like over 53 up through 55. There's our late night prime time-ish type thing. Let's pull up that recap graphic. Yep. So we got under 51.5 in Clemson, Florida State for Alicia. Michael's taking Notre Dame laying the 17 against Stanford. And then I'm taking the over 52.5 in that Notre Dame Stanford game. So before we get to a few questions in the comments, we have a bunch of games that we want to go through rapid fire. I have 3 more bets, guys. I'm just going to go through really, really fast right now. We'll start with one game, another marquee matchup between undefeated teams. Michigan laying 6.5, 7 against Penn State. We'll call it 7 for this sake. I like Michigan in this game. Haven't really believed in Penn State, and I know people are a little concerned with Michigan, how they've looked against a little bit step up in competition in the Big Ten, but Penn State, I don't see it at all. I still don't trust Sean Clifford. They don't really have vertical threats outside of Tinsley. And I think this Michigan defense is going to outperform what they've looked like the past few weeks. I think that this has been more of a elongated preseason more than anything. We've seen JJ McCarthy start to find his legs and his comfortability as a passer. Second half, completed over 80% of his passes, 2 touchdowns against Indiana. It's Indiana, but it's still, you got to get those reps in for a dynamic quarterback like that. So I like Michigan laying the 7. I don't trust this Penn State team going on the road. I think Michigan takes care of business. Another Big Ten game, Nebraska plus 13.5 against Purdue. This hit 14 yesterday. I like it down to 11.5. Great situational spot for Nebraska. Purdue beat Minnesota as dogs. They beat Maryland as dogs. And now they have Wisconsin next week. Nebraska now as big favorites. I don't see it at all. Purdue pass-happy offense. And Nebraska's secondary is actually pretty solid, 29th in explosive pass defense. So I think they can hang around in this game. Purdue can't really run the ball. So I like Nebraska getting 2 scores. And last one, a weeknight play. I'm going to take the over in SMU Navy, over 57.5. Navy can't defend the pass. That's all SMU wants to do. Top 5 in plays per minute. They're really trying to just go and air the ball out. And the Navy offense coming along nicely. Hung 50 plus on Tulsa last week. Don't hear that much from a triple option team, but we bet Navy last week because Tulsa's defensive line is terrible. Outside the top 100 in defensive line yards. SMU has a similar problem. 82nd in defensive line yards, not 89th in rush yards allowed per game. So I think, you could see SMU push 40. You could see Navy push, high 20s. This game goes over 57.5. So there's a few more best bets for the slate. Alicia, Michael, do you guys have anything else before we answer a few questions?
I'm with you on Michigan. I think that this Michigan has looked like slogging through the sort of Big Ten slate, and so they're sort of lulling people to sleep as far as, well, are they a good team? You get them against Penn State, and they're gonna explode. This is not a game that they're gonna go into feeling like it's a routine kind of game. This is a game that's gonna get them up. And so yes, I 100%. I think you're Nebraska. I put no faith in. So have fun with that one. But yeah, I'm with you on Michigan. Yeah,
Michael, what do you think?
I want to see what Penn State can do here. I think it's a really interesting opportunity. I feel like the last couple of years, things have kind of faded with the Nittany Lions as putting everything together for James Franklin. This is the opportunity to put up or shut up. And Michigan has been very solid, struggled with Indiana last week, but finished at the end. So I sort of lean Michigan there, but I could go either way. One game that I did want to mention here is Kansas and OU. The Sooners touchdown favorites in Norman. I know there's quarterback issues with Jalen Daniels at Kansas and Dylan Gabriel at OU, but the Sooners were just atrocious last week on defense, on offense, with all their insistence on working with the Wildcat stuff. There is no way I would touch the Sooners at this point. I think they're toxic.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even if Gabriel comes back, the Oklahoma defense is the real problem. And, they're down to, I think I saw 4 scholarship linebackers. This is a razor thin defense. And, Jason Bean came in for Kansas last week and was slinging it all over the yard. I mean, he was looking all right. So, I mean, maybe with an extra week of practice, it doesn't look like Jalen Daniels is going to play. I think it's Kansas or pass. Maybe, I saw right before we hopped on, I saw Daniels was called doubtful. So this line's probably going to creep towards Oklahoma the whole way. So maybe wait out on the opposite of the early read, the late read, jump in on Kansas at a big number. I think they could hang around. There's just good mojo with Kansas. I don't buy until they lost their bubbles kind of burst. I think Kansas can hang around. And then I saw a few questions about this game. I want to make sure we talk about it. Another Big 12 game. TCU, Oklahoma State. I've been clamoring for the TCU hype. It is now finally here. People are believing in them. Jerry knows the early readers are ready for the Frogs at the top 10. I agree. I think that they're going to beat Oklahoma State going away in this one. Spread out to 3.5. If you want to look like last week, TCU team total over, not a bad look if it's below 35.5. I think still good. Oklahoma State's defense, I know they won and covered against Texas Tech last week. That was also against a third-string quarterback who has no experience. And the defense was on the field for over 100 plays. This defense is going to be exhausted. And this is a TCU offense that does not let up. They've scored more than 38 or more points in every game this season. I like the Horned Frogs a lot in this spot. I think that they're going to take care of Oklahoma State. Will be an exciting game. A lot of points going to be scored, but the Oklahoma State defense gives me a lot of concern for this one. So I like the Horned Frogs, whether it's the spread or their team total over, which would be, below 35.5 is pretty good. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one? Alicia, I'll start with you.
Put some respect on Max Duggan's name. I think it's
right.
Duggan. I was just sort of freaking out. Like, is it Dugan though? I'm pretty sure it's Duggan. He's been amazing this season. He's been outstanding. He has gone to town on every defense he's faced so far. So yeah, I'm with you on TCU. This team is proving itself week in and week out. It's time to start giving them some respect.
Yeah. Michael, any thoughts on the Horned Frog?
The OU win was huge. I think for Oklahoma State, I mean, I didn't care for the defense last week against Texas Tech, and it's only going to get worse this week against TCU. So yeah, I'm with you on the Frogs.
Yeah, I think this has to be. I know the spread's kind of getting out there, but I think you got to play TCU here. I just think they're the better team. I think they've showed that they're the better team, and I think that they bring it. But awesome show. I mean, we just hit on everything in 42 minutes. I think pretty much all the games we wanted to get to have been touched. I'm going to have a bunch more plays. You can check that out on my bet stamp at RW33. Guys, I want to give you your chance. Plug the Rain of Troy Radio because you guys are doing awesome work. And I know you do your post-game live show. So hopefully Saturday's show is entertaining, we'll call it, for maybe different reasons. But yeah, please plug Rain of Troy Radio.
I mean, it'll be entertaining, win or lose for USC. We'll be over on YouTube at Reign of Troy Radio. Look us up there. On Twitter at Reign of Troy. You can follow the show there. We cover USC football and from every angle that you can. And it's going to be a big week for the Trojans going on the road against Utah. And right after the game, we'll be on YouTube to talk about it. And Alicia will be dropping all of her hot takes.
Yeah,
that's the thing I'll guarantee, win or lose. If it's a win, I will be ecstatic and people will get to vibe with me about how happy I am. And if USC loses, I will have a lot to rant about, and that will be fun too.
Yeah, definitely. And I see Josh Arena in the chat saying he missed all the USC talk. It's all good. We have the full recap graphic here where I'm going to rattle off a bunch of games and lose my voice here. But let's pull up that full recap graphic and we'll go through all our best bets. So Alicia, she took Utah -3. Can you believe that? A Rain of Troy radio host going against the Trojans. She laid the 3 with Utah. Cal, Colorado under 48.5. Iowa State +16.5 against Texas. And the Clemson, Florida State under 51.5. Michael, he took the USC Utah under 64.5. The over 73 in Arizona, Washington. Illinois +6.5 against Minnesota. Notre Dame -17 against Stanford. And then I took the first half under in USC Utah 33. I took the under in Washington State, Oregon State at 53.5. Took Tennessee +7.5 against Alabama. And then the Stanford Notre Dame over 52.5. I have a few more best bets in there if you want to rewind for that. But yeah, that's our show, guys. Big shout out to Joanne Woodcock. She does everything behind the scenes. She is the best in the business. Again, if you want to check out the rest of my plays, go to my bet stamp at RW33. There'll be plenty more there. But that's our show. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the BetSided YouTube page. Everybody have a profitable week 7.